1, 2, hello. Mic test 1, 2, hello.
We're at 3. That is an A minus. Still good, but don't get into Waterloo engineering. But people, if you're here for the general meeting, please sign in. If you stay, you will get poutine. You love free food, do you not? This is what you're told by the youth. Hey folks, you know what amazing for a date is? Ask your significant other to the end of the meeting. It's a great idea. we're at 87. Surely people in the audience have at least 13 more friends.
Everybody who has not received a ticket, which we will use for food later, put up your hand. We will come give you a ticket. You must also have a placard for me to give you a ticket.
Mic test 1 2. Mic test 1 2.
Hello, is a Haley McLeod here? If your name is Haley McLeod, can you please report to the check-in station thing? Thank you. We're at 92. We're in the 90s, folks. Again, still not good enough for some of the engineering programs here. We are one person away from hitting quorum. One person. If you are here for the general meeting, please report to the back to check in. If you are holding a placard, can you please sit in one of the green seats? It just makes it easier for me to count your placards. Okay, I have been given the almighty thumbs up. Not quite thumbs up. Okay. This will take approximately 1 more minute. Abaraj, would you like to serenade us with a beautiful song from Taylor Swift?
I'm not the best singer, but sure, if you want me to. Which one? That's Katy Perry, that's not Taylor Swift. Come on. I'm hurt.
Take it off.
I'll do it with someone.
What?
I'll sing if someone else sings as well.
Okay, I forget how it goes. We'll do it during halftime, okay? People at the check-in table, are we good? We're good. We get 2 thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you, folks. Okay. Okay, so I call this meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm just going to start with some remarks from the chair here. Hello, welcome to WUSA's 2023 Annual General Meeting. I will be your chair for today. My apologies if I sound like a stand-up comedian. This is just what happens when I touch a microphone of any sort. As chair, it's my duty to keep this meeting orderly, respectful, and timely. And to do so, we will be using Robert's Rules of Order. I'll be going through a quick sort of run-through to basically demystify what can be a very scary book for some people. So, Robert's Rules of Order, it's a book. Honestly, most of the book you don't really need to bother with. It's just a way to make sure that meetings with a lot of people are able to run effectively and efficiently. Remember that your vote counts. You don't need to know everything. If you mess up or whatnot, I can help you out. Other folks who understand Robert's rules can help you out, so don't be afraid to make mistakes. I know it can be quite intimidating. We're going to go to the next slide. If you are already comfortable using Robert's rules, can you please raise your hand? Okay, look to your left, other folks. Look to your right. Feel free to ask these people for help if you get stuck. Just don't be too loud when you do so, but please rely on your peers as a resource. It's very important. So generally, when we're discussing a motion, when we discuss anything, there needs to be a motion on the floor. So it's just an action that we want WUSA to take, or a specific individual to take. So an example of a motion might be it resolved that WUSA shall serve poutine at today's annual general meeting, which is something we are doing. So the motion passes if it's one person more than half in favor. So we have 100 people here, so we need 51 in order for this motion to pass. When it comes to speaking on the motion, each person will get 2 10-minute long speaking terms. You do not have to speak for the full 10 minutes. Would advise that you do not if you don't need to. If a point has already been made, usually you don't need to re-say it. Folks are listening carefully and have already heard it. If you have a question for someone, what I would like you to do is say that you're ceding your speaking time to whoever is answering the question. This just makes sure that the person answering your question is not using their speaking turn to provide information to you. Got it? Okay, next slide. Okay, so the person who moves the motion gets to speak first. The seconder gets to speak second, but if the seconder has nothing to say, they can say, whatever, ignore me, we can carry on. From then on, I will be picking who raises their hand next, and I will be keeping a list. When you speak, please say your name, because we will need it for the minutes. When I acknowledge you, I might need to refer to you by the color of shirt you're wearing or something like that, just because I don't know all your names. I will try to remember all your names, but I have a very short-term memory, so next slide. Okay, so amendments. So these are very fun things. Say you like the spirit of the motion, but there's something wrong with it, right? You might say, hey, why is WUSA serving poutine? What about the vegans? What about vegetarians? Poutine has gravy with meat in it. That's not fair, right? But you personally might really want poutine. So we might motion to amend. So we take the original motion and we change it into what's at the bottom there. And also you might be thirsty, so you want beverages too. So that also needs a mover, also needs a seconder. The 10-minute thing that I mentioned before, you get a new set of those things for this. When we return back to the main motion, any time that you've already used up has already been used up. And you can amend the amendment, but you can't amend the amendment to the amendment. We can't go very deep into amendment section. I won't get too much into it now. I'll explain it more if we do hit that circumstance. Flip. Okay, so these are the three things that you're allowed to interrupt the person speaking or the speaking list. Again, try and be a little bit respectful with this. There's a cheat sheet on the back of your placards that you can use, but again, just, tap someone if you don't quite understand. So point of order, procedures are being followed and you liked it to be rectified. Say someone goes over their 10 minutes. Say I just completely forgot you in the speaking list. At that point, when appropriate, you'd say point of order, actually, you skipped me, and I will rectify that issue. Point of privilege, something's preventing you from participating. Maybe the person behind you keeps poking you in the back and saying, I don't know, not touching you, not touching you, not touching you, and it's getting really annoying. Tell me, and I will smite them. Not actually. Point of information, so if to understand what's being talked about, let's say someone's using a lot of technical jargon, they're using, acronyms that you just don't understand. In scenarios where, the person next to you or whatnot, or you can't find it through any other means, then you can raise a point of information because it's preventing you from being able to participate in the meeting and understand what that person is saying. If you don't remember specifically what the point of something is, just raise your hand and just say point of something, and I will interpret that for you. Next slide. Is there a next slide? There's no next slide. Okay. Enjoy the cat. Okay, so moving forward to the territorial acknowledgement. So WUSA acknowledges that our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. Waterloo is situated on the Haldeman Track, land promised to 6 nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, obviously territorial acknowledgements are important, but they are meaningless unless actions are associated with that. So again, I'd encourage you to reflect a little bit on the history of colonialism that impacts this campus. I've been around since 2016 in this campus, and I've seen a lot of things change since then, but obviously not enough. So something WUSA is working on is engaging with the Indigenous Student Association, who are housed in, now it's called United College, the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center. They host Soup and Bannock every Thursday, so if you're ever interested in learning more about Indigenous cultures that exist in Canada or would like to engage with some students there, I would encourage you to go visit there. They're great people, really fun. So moving on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for adoption of the agenda? Okay, I'll take Tam and Catherine. Sorry, I saw you in the back, but I don't remember your name. Also, who is holding the second mic? Okay, Denver is going to be the runner. That's good to know. Okay.
Check.
Is there any discussion on this item? Okay. Seeing none. All opposed, please raise your placard. All abstaining, please raise your placard. By process of elimination, we have adopted the agenda. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes from the 2022 general meeting. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Okay. Man with the mustache. Say your name. Run your thing. Reese. Okay. Cool. And Katie as my seconder. Okay. Is there any discussion on the minutes from the last general meeting? Abaraj, go.
I have a question. We had a couple of general meetings last year. Are we only approving the minutes for one of them?
Yes. I believe the other general meetings, we approve the minutes at those.
Okay. I don't believe that was done, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Mike is telling me that the final versions for those aren't ready yet, so they will be approved at subsequent general meetings. Are there any more questions or concerns? Were there any mistakes in the minutes from last meeting, if you were there and or if you watched the recording? Okay, I'm seeing none, so same thing. Anyone opposed to passing the minutes from last general meeting, please raise your placards. Anyone abstaining from approval of the minutes, please raise your placards. Motion passes. Moving forward. Fun one, folks. Election of the Board of Directors. Be it resolved that the Assembly appoints Norris, Rory, and Katie Traynor as President and Vice President, respectively. Be it further resolved that the Assembly appoints the following students as directors as elected by the membership. I am not reading all those names. Seconder. Catherine moves. Denver seconds. Denver is holding Dowd's proxy, so yes. Okay, do we have any discussion on this item? Sir, over there.
My name is Sahil. I was just wondering, what is the point of this motion if there was an election? Does the election not confirm the appointment of the president?
Yeah, so it's actually a legal requirement for the board of directors to be elected at an annual general meeting. So essentially the election and stuff is just to fill in the blanks over here. Generally, we expect the membership to respect democracy and that sort of process. There is a whole bunch of things that prevent us from just replacing the names right now. Theoretically, you could say, hey, actually, I don't have confidence in these people, and you can say no. That is something that you would be empowered to do. Would create some issues for us because we'd have to run another election, but that is within the right of the general meeting to do. That answers your question? Okay. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments on this motion, everyone opposed to this motion, please raise your hand. Okay. Everyone abstaining from this motion, please raise your hand. Esther, do you need specific notes on those people or no? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I count 18 abstaining. Sorry, can I just get, can everyone put their placards down again? Okay, anyone opposed, can you please raise your placards again? Okay. So I see 2 opposed. Okay, so regardless the way the math works out, the motion still passes? Okay, moving on, folks. Bylaw amendments. Okay, so I'm going to speak to these ones a little bit just because they're coming from the board. For all remaining member motions, I'm just chairing the meeting. I'm not going to be involved in them. So basically, what the bylaws allow the board of directors to do is that they can pass an amendment to the bylaws but it needs to be confirmed by a general meeting. So right now, these rules are in effect. The general meeting, though, can decide, hey, actually, we don't like that, and decide to deny it, and then it just ceases being part of the thing. So essentially, I'm not going to read the entire thing over here. I trust you can read it. But the problem that we were trying to address is in the previous bylaws, it allowed folks who had recently graduated to be officers, so to work full-time for WUSA as the president or VP. We used to have more VP roles. But new bylaws didn't allow for this. From asking folks who were involved in the governance restructure, this wasn't an intentional decision that had been made. A lot of folks, specifically international students, because of visa requirements, they actually can't serve as president or VP that easily unless it's after they graduate. Additionally, students with disabilities, it can create a little bit of an issue with that as well. So ultimately, board decided to amend the bylaws such that if you were a WUSA member, so if you were a student, when you ran, you were still allowed to finish out your term as president or VP. This doesn't apply to the board of directors who usually do 10 hours of work for the organization, just pertains to the president and VP roles. I realize I forgot to ask for a mover and seconder. A mover and seconder. Matthew moves, Rory seconds. Let's pretend I said the stuff after that. Okay, do we have any questions or comments on that? Denver?
Not me.
Okay, I am seeing no questions or comments on that. Okay, everyone opposed to, back to the original motion, Esther? Okay, everyone opposed to the motion that reads, be it resolved that the Assembly confirms the board's approval of the amendment to the bylaw which introduces clause 3.1D to ensure undergraduate students holding officer positions can complete their term of office after graduating. See, 2 opposed, 3 opposed. And count to 10, and you have to get all your placards that need to go up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everyone abstaining, please rate your placards. If you have several things, can you fan them out like you have a lot of money? Okay. Well, regardless, the amounts in favor still outweigh the amounts in opposed, so that motion passes. Moving on to the next one. Here. You actually, scroll down a little bit. Like exact, be it resolved that, be it resolved that the Assembly authorizes board to instruct the lawyers to include a provision in the bylaw stipulating that WUSA is not allowed to join any external organization whose bylaws override WUSA's bylaws. I am the mover. Do we have a seconder? I'll take Maria seconder. Okay, so the background for this, folks, this was a provision that was also in our old bylaws. It was sort of brought about because there was an organization, an external advocacy alliance that we were part of once, that has a history of suing student associations and not letting them leave. It's caused at least one student association to experience bankruptcy. It's not a great organization to be a part of, and there's probably a couple of other ones like that kicking around. So having this provision in our bylaws basically provides a safety mechanism to prevent us from joining those organizations. If WUSA in the future really wanted to join those organizations, they would just have to go in front of the general meeting again and articulate why this bylaw that we're planning on adding should be removed to allow them to do so. But again, this is just sort of a safety provision to make sure that WUSA is able to retain its independence, and any external organization that WUSA chooses to join allows us to leave. Do you have any questions or concerns? Why am I forgetting your name? Quinn.
I'm wondering what purpose is created by this bylaw that could not just be created by the board being more careful in what organization. When it feels like it adds possible motions to future meetings that wouldn't need to be there.
I think that's a valid critique of it. I prefer to sort of idiot-proof organizations. I've seen boards historically and other student associations who, you know, they go through years of very prudent, very careful boards, and then, you know, something happens. So we decided a while ago that we would have this in our bylaws. They weren't something that were added in the new ones, probably because the governance consultants thought it was, you know, fluff, or that it didn't necessarily need to be there. But just seeing that joining these organizations have had on other student associations, I really think that we should have this safeguard in place.
That's fair.
Dr. Abaraj?
Yeah, I just had a question. In practice, how would this work if an external organization that WUSA is already a part of decides to change their bylaws in such a way that it automatically leave it? Like, how would this work in practice?
Matthew is going to answer that.
Yeah, I can answer that. Broadly, an organization, an external organization that we joined, like the ones we're members of right now, couldn't unilaterally change their bylaws in a way that says all of our members now have to also comply with us, because that's sort of something that would be entered into as a contractual obligation when you joined an organization like this. So if they made a move like that and said, hey, we've changed our systems and you need to comply with us and you have to sign this deal that, you know, says you will and da-da-da-da-da, that's the point at which we would say, no, we won't join, and actually this would prevent us from doing so as well. That answers the question. Can I as well that I don't know if I was next on the speaking list.
Yes, you can be next on the speaking list.
Thank you. I wanted to add just a tiny bit more to answer Quinn's question, which was, I think a key piece of this is that, you know, the GM, the students here always have the power to change what the bylaws are and amend things in the future if they want to change direction. But a key piece about having this safeguard, because I agree, we don't want to pass a thing that says, you know, the board can't burn the building down because they're never going to do that and just make our things, you know, unnecessarily long. But the key piece about this is something that's very feasible and very reasonable that could happen, and does happen at other student associations where sometimes these predatory external organizations secretly sponsor people to get elected to try to get them to join their organization. And this forces a board that wants to join that organization for a good reason or a bad reason to come before this assembly, this group of future people, and justify why, versus being able to just do it on their own without having, you know, ran on that and told everybody that's what's going to happen. So I think that's a really key piece here.
Denver, there's a guy over there. Sorry, and if you can just say your name again.
Yeah, so my name is Sahil. I was just wondering, what exactly does it mean for their bylaws to override WUSA's bylaws? What does that look like?
So for example, another organization can say, so WUSA's bylaws might say that to leave an external organization, we have to vote for that like at a referenda, right? The other organization can say, hey, actually the referenda needs to meet these requirements where you need, say, 15% of your students voting in it, right? So they can change the terms by which you're allowed to leave. And just historically, there have been student associations who have tried to leave organizations. They haven't been able to, and they've still been stuck paying fees for a service that they no longer want. So that is something that we are actively trying to avoid us getting into. Any other comments? Denver?
I just wanted to raise that, like, I recognize this seems a little redundant, but I think the atmosphere of this room is like folks are very recognizing that there's a need for this. Occasionally information gets lost, so this helps WUSA also 5-10 years down the road. And if there ever was an instance where we wanted to change it, there are still abilities to reverse this if we wanted to, but through a more stringent democratic process. So I think it's a really good fail-safe for the org to protect it from some of those predatory practices that we see in some of the external organizations that we might occasionally work with.
Okay. I am seeing no other hands raised, so I'm going to move forward to a vote. All opposed to this motion, please raise your placards. Okay. All abstaining from this motion, please raise your placards. Okay. Motion passes. Moving on to the next one. Please scroll. I also submitted this, apparently. Huh. Okay. Be it resolved that the Assembly authorizes board to instruct the lawyers to include a provision in which the bylaws, which empowers the board to remove a director with a 2/3 majority vote in favor of such removal. Can I get a seconder? Marie seconds. So just a little bit of background. When we changed the governance model, this was something that was recommended to us by the governance consultants. At the time, one of the students on board had a concern that you could basically manipulate this provision, and that is a valid concern. Simultaneously, though, currently, board only has the power to basically bring a director who isn't doing their jobs to a general meeting for them to be removed. Currently, directors, they receive an honoraria of $1,000 a month. That's quite a bit of money, especially if that individual isn't doing their job. So by having this provision in place, you empower board to hold other directors accountable to make sure that they are doing their jobs. Again, I will acknowledge that there's a little bit of a risk that if board just decides they really don't like a person, they could try to boot them, but there should be other mechanisms in place for an individual to appeal that decision. Folks on speaker list, can you please raise your hand? I see Abaraj, I see Guy in back. Why do I keep forgetting your name? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like the way the motion is currently worded, would that also give the board the power to like remove president and VP? Like, are
Denver, do you have an answer for that? I don't know off the top of my head, actually. That is a good question. Oh, Esther is just checking the bylaws.
Yeah, the bylaws is being checked. Yes, I believe there's another mechanism in the bylaws for the board to do that. But probably the answer, or there might not be, they're double checking. Probably the answer is yes, the vice president and president are directors. This is a very normal mechanism for a board to have to achieve the same kind of end that it's talking about here, which is a director that is not meeting the obligations that they've committed to, and it gives it a mechanism to remove that director from that seat.
I guess I'll just also raise for the group. I believe they would still be president and VP and just not on the board, correct?
It depends on what the bylaws say. The bylaws might require the president and VP to be directors. We're going to move to another question in the meanwhile while our governance manager looks that up.
Yeah, sorry, my name is Sahil. I was just wondering, would it be maybe good to have it so that the general still has to approve the action afterwards? I know it's a bit weird because we have 1-year terms, so that might not be plausible, but would it be good to have some kind of a safeguard?
I think it depends on how you're doing it. You could probably set it up in a way where like the general meeting like reaffirms the decision of, but that the thing goes into effect sort of earlier. Again, I'll just say that direction this conversation is going. This might be a motion that we want to amend if we feel as if, we're just worried about things. There's a couple of directions you could go through with this, but I guess I would encourage the next people who speak, if you have, like, to raise your specific concern with the motion, and maybe we can workshop an amendment that works for folks if you do believe in the spirit of it. To Quinn and then Charlie.
Okay. Number one, I believe our bylaws actually do have a provision where a director can be removed by the general meeting. That's the only mechanism right now. That is already there. We'd have to call a special meeting and get a quorum like we have of this body. My view is that this is broadly a good provision to have. It's a very normal provision to have. Our lawyers originally recommended that we have it, and then it was sort of the board around, which I was on at the time, that thought, we could see this being abused in some ways, so we would not want to go that direction. My view was and is that this makes sense. Number one, directors broadly have like a legal duty of care, a fiduciary duty to the members and to the corporation. So if they were removing somebody for personal slight kind of issues, they would certainly be in violation of that duty and opening themselves up to legal liability, like being sued. Although whether that would happen is certainly something to be questioned. I think that what the protection of this is here is that the removal of a director would be a very public, very clear action that students would be very well aware of. If it was something that was being done for something other than extraordinarily justifiable means, students would and should rightly torch the board and sort of lash back on that. But this is a very regular thing for boards to have in order to have that sort of board discipline. Otherwise, once you're in this position where you're actually getting also an honorarium paid for, from student fees to sort of make it commensurate with, you're otherwise given these kind of hours of a part-time job. If you are choosing not to do the work and not to do anything and not to fulfill your duty to the students that elected you, then you can just sort of sit there collecting that money without any reprieve. So I think it's important that the board sort of have that power. One thing I want to note is I think that the original recommendation from our consultants and the lawyers on this was for 3/4 majority of the board, not 2/3. I might be incorrect there, but I think it was 3/4, which is a slightly higher standard than the motion as written offers. So if there was a desire for a slight bit more accountability, which I would broadly support, we could amend that 2/3 to 3/4, which I think was the original recommendation, so that it's so much that you couldn't remove somebody to pass a decision because you already have a clear majority to pass that decision. So there would be no perverse incentive to be removing people.
I was just wondering, forgive me if my knowledge of the procedure is lacking, but if the board has the ability to call a special meeting, perhaps could it be amended that the board is granted the power to temporarily remove a director and suspend their privileges and duties until a special meeting can be called to uphold the decision?
Yes, that is something that we can do.
I don't want to just propose it because I don't have a great knowledge of the system, but...
Yeah, I guess I'll explain what I think the consequences are, because again, I'm trying to stay as impartial as I can while also providing information. It's a lot of effort that it takes to organize a general meeting. Notice has to go out a bunch of days beforehand. There's restricted as to when it can happen, and we've had trouble, clearly, obtaining quorum. So there is a way to make that work. I think it could result in more general meetings being called and it basically just being kicked down the line. So that's my only concern. But
Right.
it is something we can do, and it is not a bad proposal.
Can I also ask how often has this been a concern? Because if this happens all the time, then yes, giving the board of the directors the ability to act, I think, unilaterally is important. But if this only happens once every 5 or 10 years, then one extra general meeting is probably not an undue burden on the populace.
My guess is that it will happen at least every 2 years, if not more. It really depends on what the expectations for the directors are. Go to Charlie, then Denver, then back to Matthew, and Matthew, that will be your second speaking turn.
There was just a similar concern that I had regarding the percentage of board of directors needed to disband a member. I think 2/3 in my mind is, I would say, too little. I think it should be closer to 75 or even 80%. My mind, at least. But I was just raising that concern as well.
Sorry, would you like to raise an amendment to that end? Okay, we'll let Denver say something, and then if you decide on that, we can go back to you, okay?
So a couple things. One, I wanted to raise about potentially moving like temporarily suspending folks. One issue we run into that is it's very awkward and harmful potentially to board dynamics if the person comes back. And also there's a fiduciary duty of board members, so they are obligated legally for the students to be doing their job. So there's a little bit of an issue because at an AGM, there's not a fiduciary duty. So say I, was a terrible board member, wasn't showing up, but I got together 50 friends, doesn't sound super likely, but these are more public positions. Arguably, I could get a group of people to come out and overturn the decision. And they don't necessarily have to make a decision based on best interest of the org. So it is open to potentially being abused. Also, are we sure on that amendment of 3/4? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna circle back with an amendment anyway, but I want to answer the question, so I'm going to cede my time to Esther, and then we'll go around. I'll enter the speakers list again.
Okay.
Yes, concerning the question on whether the president and vice presidents would also fall into the category of those that will be subject to removal, because of the way the bylaw is currently couched and states that the number of directors are fixed at 13, and that's essentially what the board is. That includes the vice president and the president. So yes, this would also apply to them.
I don't want to steal somebody else's thunder if they were going to move it, but I'll move to amend the 3/4.
Quinn seconds. Now we are discussing the amendment. So this is a conversation as to whether or not it makes sense to change it to 3/4. When we move back to the original motion, if this passes, then the 2/3 will be replaced with 3/4. If it is more preferential to you to, basically you can vote for 3/4 without voting for the actual motion. People use different strategy and stuff with this. Not going to go into that. But now you're just voting whether or not to change the wording there of what we're considering to 3/4. You are not voting to actually enact the thing itself. Do we have any comments? Hello. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry, yeah. Mover, seconder, I'm here, then Mike.
Or to steal whoever that was thunder. Broadly, I think that we've discussed why this makes sense, but the odds of you getting 75% of the board to blatantly violate their duty and expose themselves to liability is certainly much slimmer than 2/3. I think it makes it a little bit safer for those that have concerns, but broadly is just a good mechanism to keep this place functioning.
Quinn, okay. Okay. Going back. Then Mike. Oh, okay. Yeah, Mike.
I just did some math. It's 9 people versus 10 people. Just for clarification, I just wanted to put that out there. So the 66% would have been 9 people of the 13 people on board. The 75% is 10 people on the 13 people board. Thank you.
I will note, just so folks are aware, there are cases where there will be vacancies in board. Generally, if people graduate during funky terms, currently we have 1 vacancy as a result of that. So those numbers can change. Would anyone else like to be added to speakers list?
I just wanted to check, if we're establishing this percentage and the board is currently only at 12 members, would the percentage then be recalculated for a 12-member board or still require 10 members?
It would be recalculated for the 12-member board.
Okay, I think that's good.
I am seeing no other hands right now. I am seeing Rory's hand right now.
Okay, so if this amendment is to include the officers as well, how does that apply to the other roles that are currently in the bylaws for the removal of officers?
That is an Esther question. Esther needs a microphone.
The officer position, the responsibilities that would typically be done by the officers would probably end up being done by staff or would be redistributed amongst the board members, depending. When that thing happens, board will decide how they would approach that. Hope that answers your question.
Run, Catherine, run.
I mean more specifically 9.10 of the WUSA bylaws called removal of officers other than executive directors. Is this removing that from the bylaws or is this going to be added as like incongruence?
So this kind of complements what we're doing already. And if you look at the part about the, let me just scroll to 9.01 that says the directors may elect or appoint. So at the point where they were drafting the bylaws, I think the intention was that everyone on the board would initially be a director, and then the directors themselves would now appoint, or amongst themselves appoint a president or a vice president. So that's why that provision is couched in that manner.
Catherine?
In particular, I think that the set of officers and the set of president and vice president are not equal. As you can see there are officers includes, or non-executive director officers also includes the secretary and any other officers that the board might choose to create as a position for that year. And not all of those people are necessarily directors. So there is that mechanism of being able to bring it to the board applies to the so they're not, but one is not completely covered by the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just confirmed there's a little bit of confusion with what the question was. In our bylaws, and unfortunately in legalese, 9.10 is a thing that exists. It's not just a regular way you pronounce decimals. So I think the question was about 9.10, which provides another procedure for removing officers of the executive director, which includes the president and vice president. That line provides that the board can, by resolution, remove the officers, which means just a motion passed by a majority. So to remove the officers as is, it only takes a majority. This amendment means that you could also remove the officers with a 75% or 2/3 majority or whatever it is we pass. But it provides a higher bar for the people that are directors and not officers. But what this provision at 9.10 does that removes the officers, the result of that, if you were to remove the president as an officer, this is actually, it could actually maybe be a slight edge case in our bylaws that there's a little bit of unexpected behavior, but my opinion is that the result would be if you remove the president, they would become just a regular director, and then the directors could either appoint a new president or split the duties between themselves, and they would be sort of like brought down from the office, which is slightly higher than their directors, and brought down to be regular director. So this, in my view, wouldn't remove them from the board, it would remove them from the office of president or vice president, if that makes it clear.
Just out of curiosity, what would be the mechanism to replace the director?
So there needs to be a certain amount of board missing in order to require there to be a by-election run. Board can always decide that it wants to run a by-election. So in cases where it maybe has to remove its president and it would struggle to split up the duties amongst itself, they would probably end up calling a by-election. So it really depends on the board how much they think they can pick up the slack or not, but they do have a duty to the students to make sure that slack is picked up in some way, shape, or form. Sorry, just trying to be mindful of time here. Are there any last minute questions on the amendment, which is to change 2/3 to 3/4? Okay, I'm seeing none right now. Okay, everyone opposed to switching 2/3 to 3/4, please raise your placard. Sorry, and if you're wondering why I'm waiting so long, some folks have proxies and they need to figure out how the proxies voted, so they're just playing with papers. I currently count 5. Can you please put your placards down? Okay. Everyone abstaining, please raise your... A lot of abstentions. Okay. Please put your placards down. So the amount of 4s are still more than the amount of against. So we will take that amendment as having passed. So Esther, can you please exchange the thing with 3/4? So we are now returning back to the original motion. Your last speaking turn.
Perfect. I'd like to motion to amend it. Sorry, folks. All I wanted to add is by secret ballot, so that way there is not a social pressure for board members to vote in one way or another, and their votes are anonymous.
Do I have a seconder on that? Person in green. Person in green, what is your name? Zach? Chris. Chris, okay, cool. The mover may speak.
Sorry, I realized I already kind of spoke to this. So the intent behind this is just so there's not a social pressure. Board members do tend to get to know each other. You get to be friends. This helps eliminate that because it would be an anonymous vote. I know it sounds a little silly, but it helps with the psychology end and makes it so we're hopefully doing the most right thing objectively all the time.
Do we have any additional folks who would like to comment on this? Catherine.
I'm wondering on whether Esther has any thoughts on something like the voting method being specified in bylaws and whether that's potentially bad.
I would rather recommend that it's not specified in the bylaws. You probably have that included in the procedure or something, but not, my recommendation is that that shouldn't be in the bylaws.
In that case, I feel similarly. So basically, board also has another set of documents called board procedures, and that's like the sort of general guidelines of how things work and how you go about doing things. So it can be specified in there in terms of what board sees as how board should act, if that makes sense. Board procedures can be suspended by a majority of the board, or possibly that would have to be done proactively if people wanted to not follow that voting method. But in general, bylaws, it's nice to have them as high level as possible. So when you start getting into the granular parts of it, it's not great practice in terms of governance. So my recommendation is to vote against, even if you think it's a good idea to have things by secret ballot. They can still be by secret ballot, but it'd be great to just not have it in the bylaws.
Denver, second speaking turn on this amendment.
Can I withdraw my motion?
Your motion
my
now belongs
amendment.
to the floor, so no.
Okay, vote against it, folks. I made a dumb decision.
All against, please raise your placards. Wow, the support for Denver is great. Okay, please put down your placards. All abstaining, please raise your placards. Please put down your placards. All for, please raise your placards. Brave man. Brave non-binary. Okay, so that amendment does not pass, and we are back to the original motion on the floor. Hopefully, no other amendments. Okay, I am seeing no other hand raised, so I am going to move to a vote. All opposed to the motion, be it resolved that the Assembly authorizes board to instruct the lawyers to include a provision in the bylaws which empowers the board to remove a director with a 3/4 majority in favor of such removal. Please raise your placards if you are opposed. Okay, please raise your placards if you are abstaining. Okay, so the motion passes. Okay, thank you folks for sticking around for so long. I know some of this governance stuff is boring and there's a lot of member motions that we are looking forward to, but we'll get through the rest of the business, and thank you for being so attentive. Would you like to come up? Yeah.
All right. My name is Matthew Schwartz. I'm one of the directors on the board, and I'm here to speak a little bit to the item on the agenda, if I can. Oh, that's not the agenda. About the WUSA financial statements, particularly the audit. Every not-for-profit corporation under the Act is required every year to have prepared and to a general meeting of the members an audit that goes over the previous financial year, checks for any issues, inconsistencies. Hopefully they don't find any criminal activity, things like that. And then those things are submitted, I believe, to the CRA and then presented here to the members so that members have a sense of what is going on within the organization financially. This year, there have been some delays with the audit process. I'm going to explain a little bit of the detail around that. The long and short of it is, though, that it's going to take, I'm told, about 2 more weeks for our auditors to finish up the audit, at which point the statements will be prepared. Our plan going forward from then is to, number one, put those documents and all of the information presented online where students can browse them. But then we are also going to call another one of these meetings, as required by law, to go over those in depth, allow students like yourselves and whoever else attends to view those statements, ask questions of the auditors, ask questions of WUSA staff and of the WUSA board, and have full confidence everything's going on there. So the audit's been delayed due to some staffing issues in our own accounting department of unexpected vacancies that meant that there wasn't the capacity to prepare the stuff for the auditors, as well as a very large vacancies within the audit firm. PricewaterhouseCooper, I believe, is our audit firm. that meant that there just, for a large period of time, was not the staffing capacity to get the actual work done of getting us to having our final audit statements ready for today. If there are any questions about that, I am very happy to take any of them. Also have Suzanne here, the Executive Director of WUSA, who can also give insight to the internal stuff if there's any questions about that. Not seeing anything. I appreciate your trust. I promise I'm not hiding any fraud.
Sounds sus.
But otherwise, those statements will be posted publicly for your consumption, as well as brought to a future meeting for questions and viewing. Thank you very much.
I have returned. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the next thing to come up over here. Okay, the next thing we have to do is approval of reappointment of the incumbent auditor. Be it resolved that the Assembly approves the reappointment of PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, as auditors to hold office until the next annual general meeting. Can I please get a seconder? Matthew moves. Why do I keep forgetting your name? I am so sorry. What the hell? Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Mr. Matthew?
This is another sort of procedural item. We are required by the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act every year to come back to this body and appoint auditors to complete the audit for the next year. We are recommending that we reappoint the current auditors to continue to audit now this next year and present next year's audit as well to next year's general meeting. This is relatively regular business. One question I imagine might come up is if our audit is late this year, are we in any way concerned about upcoming audits from the same auditors? And my immediate answer to that would be I'm not particularly concerned for what it's worth, understanding that the circumstances this year were very much a bit of a perfect storm kind of scenario with huge just vacancies in staff on both ends that meant that that process got delayed. I think that they're doing a good job, and we've been with them for, I believe, 2 years now. It's often that organizations, every 5 years, say, might switch auditors in a matter of practice, but it's very normal for us to be reappointing an auditor like this in this kind of scenario.
Any other folks would like to add a comment or question? Point of information.
So I have proxies, right? And the proxies have decisions for question 7, not question 8, and I'm wondering what to do with that. And 7 didn't have a vote, so.
What? Okay, and everyone on proxies has the same problem. Okay. There's a way to do this, and it's to see whether or not those proxies would have actually affected the outcome. I know that there are, this is a math problem. I know that there are 29 proxies, so if enough people vote in favor where it is more than 29, then it passes. Okay. So if folks are okay with doing that, we're going to do a little bit of math. Save us some time here. Okay. All in favor of passing this motion, please raise your placards. I will actually count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. $27. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, Jesus Christ. Up really high. Okay. Counting with Steph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Oh my gosh, math. Okay. Is anyone voting against? Thank you for catching that part. Okay, any voting against this motion? Seeing none, by process of elimination, this motion does pass. Congratulations. Just with regards to food, I'm going to say that we're going to get through these two updates, and we're going to go through one of the member motions, and then we can decide whether or not then we want to go grab food as an assembly. Okay? Okay. Update on motion for goose statue. Can we pull up the goose statue thing that passed last General Assembly? And can we try and like squeeze them all into one thing? Okay. Congratulations, guys. I have done it. Mr. Goose. No, that isn't the actual statue. Sorry. Just to provide a little bit of update, this motion was a member-submitted motion that was amended on the floor to make it a little bit more reasonable. But essentially, the membership had said, hey, you know, it'd be really cool, artwork on campus. You know what we really love as students? The goose. You know what might be really costly? A goose statue. So let's figure out a way to see if we can create a goose statue while counteracting some of the costs by reaching out to alumni, reaching out to the Graduate Student Association, reaching out to the university, and giving us some flexibility to figure out if this is something that we can pull off and do. So the motion that you see over there reflects that. So just to provide a little bit of an update to folks, our staff have identified a potential artist who will work with us to create this goose. They're a local, and I find the little notes I had, or I will just say it from memory then. Wow, okay, I lost it. Basically, local artist is going to help us create a goose statue. He's famous for creating a bunch of like sleeping Jesus statues supposed to like represent homelessness crisis. So he's been working with us. We sent out a fun Instagram poll. It got the most responses out of any Instagram poll we had, which is great. So the one that won was the stance of the goose, which is very exciting. So we are working with Plantops to figure out where this goose would go. Because there's stuff underground like steam tunnels and wires and other things, and you can't put it too close to a fire hydrant. But we are working to get that thing hopefully built. We've talked to a university a little bit about it, and they're very supportive, so we're hoping that the university is going to give us money for it. That would be great. But yeah, really excited to provide the update that we are making progress on this. And yeah, this is exciting. I'm very excited. Questions?
Hello, I have a request for information.
Yes.
So I just want to say that I'm all in favor of the idea of building a goose statue. I would just like to know an estimated cost, if there is one.
Right now is around 33K.
Okay. Okay.
Well, comment in the grand scheme of WUSA's budget and just the cost of getting furniture and other things on campus, like I have seen getting couches for a student lounge to be more expensive than that.
Just wanted to clarify, so it's 33,000, and which, to be fair, not a lot, but you mentioned that we're also looking for funding sources from like the university or other sources, right? So
yeah, so we're still figuring that out. My anticipation is that discussions on this would happen at board. So there would be more conversations to see whether or not this is something that is worthwhile doing,
right.
Just given our financial states and given the benefits that are provided.
Okay, thank you.
I'll state that that's just a preliminary quote we received. dimensions and stuff that have been proposed might not be right. The university also has like some hyper-specific requirements about, you know, making sure that there's a concrete pillar so that the engineers can't steal it, things like that, that might up the cost a little bit. Again, we're really cognizant and aware to not spend too many resources on this, but broadly, we've received a bunch of positive feedback from students who are very excited, and some alum as well. So if it's something that we can pull off, would be great if we could. Any other questions? Hello.
Just a simple one. Is there a proposed name for the sculpture?
Not yet.
Okay.
Are there any proposed locations, like definite locations that have been proposed for the site?
Alana is the one working on that file, if she is around. I think her general goal is to have it near SLC. You're kind of close to the pack entrance so that you can like tap it before you go in for like exams, or like outside when you get like that money shot of the SLC. But lots of considerations and stuff taking into place. I don't know, just shoot me an email if you have like specific opinions. No other questions? So I'm going to move forward to updates on the governance review. Oh, Alana, our friend had questions about location.
Sure about location. We are talking now, just because Plan Ops has to give us the okay if there's anything underground somewhere. So I'm just waiting to.
Cool. So I am going to move on to the updates on governance changes. So folks, if you've been following WUSA since last year, you'll be aware that we've undergone a major governance review. Formerly, we used to have 4 full-time executives, some of which did a lot more operational work, such as oversee our finance and operations, or oversee our clubs, services, and other things. We also used to have a student council and then a fiduciary board. So basically the state of governance that we used to have before, you know, it had some advantages, but it also had a lot of disadvantages, and something that WUSA committed to doing in its 5-year strategic plan was doing a governance review. So we had governance consultants come in, and they provided some recommendations, of which included shrinking the size of our governing body and combining council with board. So that is what we have gone ahead and done. There's a couple of changes we made to the having a provision that ensured that if one student from each faculty ran, that they would be represented on the board. So things like that, we made changes just to reflect the nature of student associations, but also the nature of our campus and its values. So we started this new governance process sort of 1/3 the way into a normal governing year. So that's when current board took place. It's been a little rough, I think, getting started, but we have, I hope, gotten to a good place. If you're interested to see the work that the board has completed, the WUSA Impact Report will be published sort of near the beginning of the next term, sort of outlining some of what has been worked on. There's also a roadmap on the website which describes some of board's goals. What I've been working on is just taking all the documents that exist underneath the bylaws. So those are our policies, procedures, like I printed them all out. They make like a really big binder, and it was a total waste of paper. But basically, there's a lot of governance jargon right now that contradicts each other in various places, and it's been very difficult to govern when it is unclear what rule actually works. So we've been working with the governance consultants to create a more condensed version that provides a little bit of flexibility for us to be adaptable while still preventing accountability. It hasn't been formally adopted yet. It has been received by board, and if you look on the website underneath board, I believe it's the March 9th minutes. that's where you'll find the proposed board manual. So if you have any comments or concerns on that, please reach out to myself or your directors. If you'd specifically like to access this document, my instructions right now were very confusing. Just tap me at the end of the meeting or just email pres@wusa.ca and I will link the thing to you. Anyways, so we've been working on that. But yeah, that's just an update in terms of where we are sitting with the governance review. Do we have any questions, concerns, comments? Agenda back. Cool. We have hit it. The member submitted motion. Round of applause. Cool. So the first motion on the floor is, scroll down a little bit. Be it resolved that the General Assembly will review all areas of operation, especially in those areas that interface directly with members of the student body outside of student government, to remove as many requirements for archaic and formal language as possible without significantly hindering the clarity or government. This is moved by Quinn Myers. Do I have a seconder? I see Matthew seconds. Can we get the mic over?
The one thing that I would just like to say on this is that I'd like to change the General Assembly part after we're all done. Ask WUSA to do so. I was not aware that General Assembly meant the people here would physically have to do that, and that would be silly. But overall, I think the purpose behind this is to try and remove barriers between members and WUSA as it relates to student engagement. The internal workings of the board aren't really of concern, but especially when publishing materials that are supposed to go out to members or asking members for feedback, trying to reduce the requirements for corporate legalese as much as possible to try and help people actually engage. Because currently, many members, when asked about the student government, will either say that it's snobby or pretentious or just a lot of work to get anything done, and that discourages people from engaging.
Matthew, would you like to?
I spoke with Quinn a little bit before the meeting and chatted over a little bit what he was trying to get at here. I had some questions about it because I'm sort of seeing the process that was actually just spoken about, the governance process. And this is a big part of that, is sort of making a lot of those systems more approachable and less like super esoteric. But that there are some places where that is necessary and sort of needs to fit in. So I chatted this over with him beforehand, and were you in, I don't know if he was in favor of it. I hope so. Oh, cool. I was going to move to amend this to be something a little bit different, which was, I'm going to read it out in a moment, but the point of it is broadly that where those places where there do need to be, legal complexities, like in this place, which is all regulated by the law, and other places where members want to participate, but there is some of that legalese or complex terminology and procedures. We develop resources and supports to educate and assist members in engaging in whatever way they want to and whatever way they have the right to under the law. So that's things like either having pieces to educate and like resources like style guides and writing things to formulate things how they need to be, but also having people like oftentimes the president available to support people, for example, turning their ideas for what they want to happen into a motion for the general meeting floor, which is what we're doing right now. So I wanted to move that we amend this to be it resolved that WUSA review the areas of its operations, particularly that of governance, where members may face barriers to engagement due to complex terminology, procedures, and systems, and develop resources and supports to educate and assist members in doing so.
Okay, Quinn seconds. Would you be able to run over there and provide that language to Esther? So that she can...
I already sent it to Esther,
oh, okay.
So it should be up there.
Okay, that's good. Carly. Or, oh, sorry, Matthew. Okay, sorry, Quinn.
I think this would just be good so that, for example, when people submit proposals, they don't task the General Assembly to do things. because especially when people haven't engaged with this before, it can be really hard to understand all of the complexities of the legalese required. So I think this is just a good proposal for that in general.
I would just like the mover of the motion to clarify the exact language we're talking about. Is it things like be it resolved or whereas, or I'd like to know exactly the language.
Just specifically going over, for example, what should be in the whereas section, what should be in the be resolved section, how to turn your ideas into this format. Just a lot of help for students so that we aren't trying to navigate it by ourselves. No, I recognize that the legalese has to be there for rules of procedure reasons, but having the ability for students to contact, let's say, the president or another member of the board to get help turning their ideas into the legalese would be appreciated.
So just want to make this like clear, because because what you said and what the motion states seem to be like two different things. Because the motion is stating that we want to remove, like we want to see where we can remove such language and remove it altogether. But what you've stated just seems like you want more resources so that students know how to be able to engage in this way.
So let me back up a little bit. It seems like folks are talking more about the original motion than the amendment. Language, more so than the original language. That's what we're having a conversation about.
Thank you.
So let us...
Because I will say at this point, when I wrote this, I didn't understand any of the legalese, which is kind of why I wanted this to be introduced. So I recognize that the original text is not a viable solution to be proposed before the Assembly, which is why we worked on getting an amendment that could actually go through. So yeah, I think that only the amendment really should be debated on right now.
Have to be precise for uses like this, and unfortunately sometimes.
I just wanted to raise that I think the amended language is a lot better. I was just talking about from a procedural standpoint too, specifically JA motions. Turns out we're allowed to give some guidance, so that's something we can incorporate as a procedure just internally. We can have some of our staff set up maybe a pre-meeting and help people through it and guide them a little bit if they want to do that, as well as, you know, a bit of a rubric on how to do this. So there's a couple of procedural pieces that we'll definitely take from this regardless, but I do like the amended language.
Okay. Do we have any other comments specifically on the amendment? None. So all opposed to amending the motion so that it now reads, WUSA review the areas of its operations, particularly that of governance, where members may face barriers to engagement due to complex terminology, procedures, or systems, and develop resources and supports to educate and assist members in doing so. Everyone opposed, please raise your placards. Please raise your placards. Okay. Motion to amend passes. We are now back to the main motion on the floor. Esther, can you cross out the thing that is no longer relevant? Do we have any comments on the current motion at hand? Okay. No other comments? Okay, so we will move to a vote. So all opposed to this motion, please raise your placards. All abstaining from this motion, please raise your placards. Motion passes. Congratulations, Quinn. Okay. I'm just going to do a quick straw poll here. How many of you are hungry right now? To give us a 15-minute recess to go grab food and then come back and eat poutine on the chairs. Okay? So we will reconvene at 7:05.
Lineup is over here, multi-purpose room. We're going to head through and feed through. Please come back after, by the way, please.
Hello, folks. If you want seconds, you may go get. We will start in 5 minutes. Hello, folks. Can you begin sitting down? Hello, folks. If you're here for the general meeting, can you begin re-sitting down on the chairs so that I can recommence the meeting? Thank you. Butts on chairs, please.
60-second warning. 59, 58.
People, please sit down. Water, water, water. Water, water. Water, water. I don't know. Forget the rest. Seconds to restart. If you're here for general meeting, get your butts on a green seat. Colorblind, it might not look green, but plastic ones where the crowd people are sitting on. Okay. Esther, are we good? Okay. We are restarting this meeting after our break. Everyone is their pop can symphony. Okay. So moving to recommendation to make athletic fees optional. Be it resolved that fees related to athletic facilities be made optional on tuition, along with similar fees to accommodate students with different levels of engagement with athletic services. Be it further resolved that a system to only allow access for those paying for services may be easily implemented through the existing turnstile infrastructure and cameras. Quinn's mover, seconder, I am going to take Matthew. Who is coming with the mic?
I think we can just jump straight into amendments again. We had another one for this, and it's a bit draconian at the moment, so.
Thank you very much. Same as last time, as I spoke with Quinn ahead of time, and we sort of agreed on a slightly different direction. So where this one takes the very just strong stance right out of the gate that the athletics fee should be optional and they should be achieved through those ways. Instead, I've written up a motion here that what it boils down to is that ahead of taking any sort of strong stance like that, WUSA should do research on what students actually believe and experience And this calls for WUSA to prepare and then publicly release a report on the athletics fee and the value it provides to students. Particularly, it wants representative data on student use of athletic space, the perceived value that students get from the athletics fee, details on what areas students feel the athletics department is not sufficiently serving their needs in terms of athletics and wellness and recreation, the perceived value of the varsity athletics funded through the athletics fee, an analysis of whether the fee should remain compulsory, and any other data deemed relevant to just better understanding that issue. And then that report should contain recommendations for WUSA on an advocacy stance, as well as recommendations on how the model by which athletic services are delivered could be changed to better meet students' needs. And all that's just to say we prepare this, this research report that either athletics department could take and just use those recommendations, and I imagine that they'll be very enthusiastic to get some feedback from students at large. But if that comes back and the athletics department is less willing to do that kind of thing, we have a really strong statement and evidence that shows this is what student experiences are to back any kind of stance that we want to take. So I think it's a really good direction to improve our services and figure out what path makes sense rather than just prescribing one right now.
Quinn seconds. Matthew, you should theoretically have waited until we got a seconder. Yeah. Before I go to other comments, just wanted to, again, emphasize that we're voting on the amendment. So if you're focusing more on the idea, the conversation ought to be about whether or not you prefer this language over the other language. And then afterwards, we can have a conversation whether or not doing this thing, if it gets amended, or the other thing is something we actually want to do, okay? Okay, Denver, and then Quinn maybe wants to go again?
I'd just like to highlight, I really like the amended language, particularly because originally as the motion was stated, there were some things that I think are very difficult, if not impossible, for WUSA to achieve, or that would harm some students without some data to drive what our decisions are. So very much enjoy the amended language, that way we can get to that point. And maybe this winds up on next year's AGM, but we'll be more informed when we make those calls.
Hello. I would also like to point out a pretty nice benefit of the amendment, that it does not mandate the use of cameras, which someone highlighted to me was a pretty medium to large privacy issue. If you're facial recognizing students in order to let them in or not let them in, we avoid that now, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so amendment good.
If I were to guess who that person was, would I guess it correctly? Gotcha.
That was more, honestly, that was not so much facial recognition, but more just see if people are jumping the turnstiles when they haven't paid for it with overhead cameras. No, facial recognition is creepy, and I would avoid that at as high a cost as I can.
Moving on back there. Turn around, turn around.
So I think a part of verification that should be implemented, if not, is that what we're talking about right now? Yes?
No, so we're talking about whether or not we want to replace, Esther, can you scroll up a little bit? So the motion is worded over here with another one down there.
Below, and we're comparing the two.
Yeah, so which one would you prefer to actually be considering in a vote?
I see. I think the be it further resolved on the top one is an important point that I don't think the language of the bottom one really encompasses. Like the verification of people paying for services and how they get through the turnstiles.
Yeah, so
I see. Okay, I'm good.
hello.
Yeah. I just had a question to which you would be conducting, like gathering the information. Would it be a survey and an email? Because I know something like that could be easily ignored by students per se.
I can answer this one from a WUSA perspective. What we'd probably do is that we'd bring this motion forward to our research folks. So those are people who would know research and best practices and whatnot, and they would figure out the best method to engage with students to get reliable results. So it'd probably look like a mixture of surveys, focus groups, other things, especially if this is something identified by a general meeting to be an important thing. I imagine more care would be taken to make sure that the results were actually representative. Also, this is like a fairly big move to be making versus what we've done historically. The important thing to be mindful of too is that like we could do all this and find out that students don't want this, but at the end of the day, like we might get pushed back from the university because it's a negotiation thing as well. We do have a reasonable amount of control in terms of how fees are charged in some things, but this might be a little bit of a tricky one. But okay, Quinn would like to respond.
I think also in general, just the report could be very helpful, even if we don't end up changing the fees, on seeing what elements of the athletics funding is appreciated by students and what parts are not. Let's say if people want the gyms to stay open and like that aspect, but don't appreciate the varsity athletics, or the other way around. I think it could help guide WUSA on how athletics should move forward, even if we don't end up changing the fees themselves.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the amendment? Over there. Sorry, and can you just say your name so that we get for minutes?
Sure, yeah. My name is Zara. I have a point of information. How much are the athletic fees?
Sorry, can you hand it over to Quinn?
They're around $100 a term per student, per academic term. Per academic term in which you are enrolled in an academic term, so not on co-op terms.
So just to clarify, if we make this amendment, so from my understanding, if we make this amendment, we're replacing the be it resolved that clauses, but not the whereas clauses. So my issue with that is that if we keep these whereas clauses, we're taking foregone students, like that STEM students do not, like a STEM focused campus does not need to have.
I will let the mover and seconder clarify what their intentions were.
These be resolved broadly replace the entire motion, whereas clauses aren't necessary for a motion. Sometimes it's like, window dressing, and the be it resolves are really the meat of it, but that'll replace all of that.
I'm perfectly fine to get rid of the whereases. Those were written grumpily at 2 in the morning, so I'm fine to get rid of them.
Okay, so we've received confirmation from the mover and seconder that that was their intention. Okay, any more comments? Name, please.
Hi, I'm Alex. I just had a question real quick. Is it possible that if we move this through, it's going to option of other things students already pay to and are going to want out of? Like if some students don't want to pay for athletics, I don't know anything already, but are other students going to start to look for opportunities to opt out of everything?
Are you okay with Catherine responding? Okay.
Yes, I guess, but that's something that is a long history of anything where people pay regular fees to something not use when they're mandatory fees. So the government of Ontario passed something called the Student Choice Initiative, which affected only specific types of student union fees, which this is not. This is charged by the university's Athletics and Recreation Department, and we are passing a report that might provide to us and bring forward to ask Athletics and Rec to recognize. But in the past, there have been pushes forward and pushes back on making more or less of the fee structure that is charged and administered by student associations or by the university itself. Opt-in or opt-out or optional or mandatory and all of these different things. It is bring that forward should that be of concern to them. But this in and of itself does not create any precedent or not accept a future motion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll just provide the additional context that, yeah, there are some fees that are decided upon as mandatory by the university. Other ones that are opt-outable, like there's different ways that fees can be assessed. Some do fall strictly within the authority of students. Other ones are a little bit of a negotiation. But for the ones that always fall within the right of students, it always is the right of students to ask to run a referenda to change the way that the fees work or to come to a general assembly. Like our views on these services and how they should be funded will change over time based on the student body. So, obviously I think each of us has our own preferences, but I think the risk of that question being open is a risk that we need to take because it is within people's rights collectively to make those decisions. And I think the role of the general meeting is just to make sure that we're making it in an informed way where people who are deciding that, like where every student is able to provide their feedback and we're able to have conversation stuff. So like, yes, it kind of opens things, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. Matthew, is there anything you want to add?
You broadly covered what I was going to say under that umbrella of like, this is looking at the athletics fee in particular, but I would reason that this is something WUSA should consider doing, and WUSA doesn't actually need a general meeting to say, so it can go off by itself and do the research into all the other large fees that students pay, not to make a crusade to make things optional, but just explore, are students getting the value that they're expecting? Is this being used in the way that students want to see, or are there changes to be made? It could be so that the result of this review is that students by and large actually want the fee to go up so that they can have all the fitness classes be accessed for free at point of access. And that might be the case that the report comes out with. And it's really just exploring what do students broadly want, what are their experiences, where are their deficiencies, and a component of that is only whether the fee is compulsory or optional. But those are good questions to be asking about other fees, particularly large other fees like this one.
Going to Rory?
I would ask then, why don't we amend it so that it includes all fees instead of just focusing specifically on this athletics and recreation fee?
I would be fine with that as long as I would argue that we start with this one, as it is one of the larger compulsory fees that I think could be reasonably made optional.
Matthew would like to comment?
If that's what this sort of body here wants to do, that's, I think, broadly an okay thing. I would more tend to err on the side of leaving this as is for two core reasons. Number one, having a more focused on one issue kind of motion, I think, is oftentimes more compelling when we're going into rooms and being like, hey, we want to, we want to advocate on changing how things are with, say, the athletics department. Having something that people approve that is very targeted toward them tends to be more compelling versus a broad, we want to review all fees, because then they tend to be like, look at us and be like, yeah, students just don't want to pay money, rather than the more nuanced way that this is speaking. As well as reviewing in sort of a shotgun approach is administratively, I think, more difficult, like it's much more resource intensive, and it takes a lot more work, and you can't really have as fulsome, you think, focusing on the one thing. So they would have to be I think they'd have to be done in sequence anyway. And once we're talking about doing them in sequence, I think WUSA can, as I said, do these reports whenever they'd like. And they can commission these reports. We commissioned a similar sort of report on housing that talked about student experience with housing and advocacy stances and potential solutions. And I think the next WUSA board should keep that in mind when they're looking at planning out the next couple of years in the long-range plan in planning out these things. My preference would be to leave this as is, just to let it be targeted and not be making like a huge, very, very onerous commitment in just a moment now.
Potential amendment you just discussed, Rory, is that something you would like to move or no?
My only worry would be that students who do use the services provided by that fee might feel targeted, like they're the only people we're really going after, whereas other fees that students are forced to pay, we're not really going after them. So I'd let you talk and then maybe I'll.
If it helps, when I originally wrote this, I read it back and thought, wow, this is way too aggressive. I don't want to be threatening these people's jobs in the explicit way it was. So I went back and wrote it in a more friendly way, where it's just sort of just getting at the issue of what it's trying to do. I think, based on my experience, that they'll actually very much invite having like some real recommendations as to how they can improve their services. They're always trying to get students to tell them how can we improve our services anyway. So I'm not concerned about that piece personally, but that's a fair concern, and if that is your concern, then bring it forward. Otherwise, I'd say for your next year on the board, absolutely bring forward the other issues that you have, and bring forward the other fees as well would be a solution.
I'm trying to keep my involvement in this minimal, but I'll say that there's only so much WUSA can do at once, and if we were to focus exclusively on reviewing the auxiliary fees that people are paying, there's a chance that we miss out on other research opportunities, like in terms of what policy recommendations we should be making towards the government to benefit students. If we want to argue for changes to like OSAP, things impacting international students, like it's sort of a zero-sum game in some way, so I'd be mindful not to over-commit us. There's no other comments. I'm going to take the vote on the amendment here. So everyone opposed to the amendment, please raise your placards. I see two. Everyone, three. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, everyone opposed to the amendment, please raise your placards. You have 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. Okay. Cool. Everyone abstaining, please raise your placards. Okay. Please put your placards down. Everyone for, please raise your placards. Okay, there are more for than against. So the amendment passes, and now this is the motion we are considering on the floor. Do we have any discussion on the amendment of the floor? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay, I'm seeing no one having their hands raised for the amendment on the floor. So I will take a vote right now. All opposed to this motion, please raise your placards. Okay, I count 17. Please put your things down. All abstaining, please raise your placards. Okay. Things down. All in favor, please raise your placards. Where this is for. Okay. I'm going to have to do a recount of the opposed, but everyone who is for, please raise your hand. Sorry, it was a lot closer than I thought. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I count 28. Hands down. Everyone opposed, please raise your placards. Okay, very close count, but the in favor won. Moving on to the next motion. What? It was 27 to 24. Okay. Hello. This thing. So the motion on the floor is, be it resolved that the General Assembly tasks the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association to work with the faculties on campus to study the effects of video-first lecturing on student outcomes. Be it further resolved that this could be achieved quite simply by asking students to dictate whether their classes were taught primarily through video lectures. Be it further resolved that if a corollary effect to student performance is found, guidance is dispensed directly through faculties to direct professors to more effective modes of teaching. Do I have a seconder for this? Second, you do not necessarily need to, okay, Denver seconds? Okay. Okay, so Quinn, would you like to speak to this motion?
Okay, so I did not phrase this one particularly well, which is a theme, but what I'm basically trying to go after here is there are professors who are teaching in-person classes who are supposed to be providing effective in-person lectures, who are instead providing the videos that they used during COVID and saying, you go teach yourself on your own time, and then come and I'll ramble at you for an hour. So I'm not saying that we should not have video lectures. I'm not saying that we should do anything to touch online courses, but I am saying that we should study the effects of professors who are not providing effective in-person lectures when they're supposed to be, because at least anecdotally, I've seen that in the classes where professors are doing this, there are a lot more challenges faced by students and the performance is a lot lower than in classes where professors did do their job.
I saw Naman and then, oh, no, Denver second.
Yeah.
Would you like to speak? Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of points I would like to raise about this. Firstly, the university is already doing this. They are working with the Center for Extended Learning, CEL, I can't remember the full form. But yeah, they're working with them to like figure out a strategy for any online courses and like basically a framework that every online course needs to follow to ensure like some sort of minimum quality requirements. So that would partially take care of what you're asking for already. And this is already underway. Like this was, when I was MathSoc VPA in fall 2022, this was happening, right? And I was part of the feedbacking process. And the second thing I wanted to add was, it's quite abrasive. If we do adopt this, I would highly, highly recommend we like use better language. And thirdly, I will say anecdotal evidence does not really count for much because anecdotally then like I have friends who have quite enjoyed video lectures and actually prefer it and kind of hate being back in person. You know, it's a different opinion and like it does exist. So I like the fact that it's asking for a report first and like, you know, if there is an effect then you like go in that direction. But given that that's already happening, I don't think we should needlessly antagonize people. That's all.
Sorry, there was an individual over there.
I just had a couple points on this one, or like maybe first one's a question, second one's a more of like what my opinion is. Just like if I understand it correctly, is it just sort of trying to assess what lectures are effective? Is that the point of this? Would you say? Yes, that is basically the idea, is seeing whether or not these video lectures are an appropriate way to replace the lectures. Because if they are, and I just don't like them, and my friends just don't like them, then oh well. Like for supplementing them, if that is appropriate, and if that is a good way to primarily teach. I will also say I am always open to amendments. I'm not, as I said, I'm not very good at the legalese, which makes me sound very grumpy when I write in it, but I'm always happy to amend things to make them more amenable to the assembly.
Sorry, I think, oh, wait, yes, back to you.
You had a second, yeah.
So for that, I'd say like if it's for in-person courses that are supplementing using video lectures, it seems like it would be the onus would be on the prof to provide a better in-person experience, and then the students could, you know, complain to their faculty or follow that procedure, right? And then the other, so I just feel like it would be like spending on WUSA to go at this, if that's the intention of it. And from my experience, the video lectures, it's actually been like the opposite for me. It's been like there are in-person courses that profs decide that even though they have video lectures available, they restrict those video lectures, like they don't provide those resources, so that they promote obviously students to come to class, but it adversely affects students that aren't able to come to class sometimes. So in my opinion, having both just, you know, provides the students with options, and if the prof isn't doing, you know, a great of a job in person, that's more on them. That's just, yeah.
Okay. Like Quinn to respond with the remainder of your time? Okay. And then we'll go Abaraj, person in back with the awesome headphones, and then Jeff.
I shouldn't take long. I completely agree. Having both is amazing. The problem that I have been finding is and I agree that normally just complaining to the faculty would be sufficient. However, I found it's very widespread, not just within one faculty, but in speaking with people from other faculties. And I think it warrants studying. I don't think, perhaps it is not the best time to do it now, but I do think that it warrants studying the effects because of the number of professors who have not traditionally, but recently started using this format.
Yeah, so Mike, I actually just wanted to like clarify something from what Naman was talking about earlier. So you mentioned that the CEL is doing a study of their own with regards to something similar, but from what I understand from what you were saying, they're doing a study about online courses, right? And from what I understand from this motion, at least the way it's currently worded, it's about in-person lectures which are using video components as the primary tool. So would CEL's study that CEL is currently conducting, does that cover in-person lectures which are using videos as the primary tool of instruction?
I can probably answer that question as well, having been VP Education to the time that Naman is referring to. So, like, I believe, yes, that's covered. The university has been trying to figure out a digital learning strategy, which will dictate how much, like, to what extent digital resources are integrated into the classroom. Part of it is complicated because of academic freedom, which gives professors a very undefined ability to teach the way they choose. So that's a little bit of a problem, but I will say that various departments within the university that specialize in pedagogy and like tech are dedicating time and effort to it. There have been opportunities for students to provide feedback, and there will continue to be opportunities. And I would say, like, broadly, like, the research sector is also looking into this as well. So my impression is that it is being covered both by the university and both by the post-secondary sector more generally. Coverage, or can I go to next? Sorry, person in headphones gets the mic next, then Jeff, and then looks like Denver has his hand up.
Hello, so I just got here late, and I was wondering if, I'm part of the Jam Network Club, and I was wondering if the studio got approved. That's my question. That's the last motion?
Yeah, it's the last motion. Well, you didn't miss it, at least.
With by the university, and considering that WUSA's limited resources are not infinite, and we have other priorities as well.
Can you put the mic closer to your
Yes,
face?
with the information that this sort of topic is already being studied by the university, and that WUSA does not have unlimited resources.
Denver was actually next, and then it goes back to Quinn, and be your last speaking turn on this.
I just wanted to raise for folks, I've been poking around a little bit on this one. Roughly this is happening at a faculty level across campus, and I know that's been mentioned a little bit. I see that as probably a best path forward because it's a little more specialized by faculty. This certainly, if there are issues with that process, I think WUSA would be jumping in already, and it's certainly something I personally can follow up on and look at a little bit. But I have been trying to think of a way to reword this motion, and I don't really see a path where it isn't redundant to things that are already happening. So I'm going to suggest we vote it down, but I think that the spirit of it is still being already captured.
I will say if all of these things are happening and they're going to be reliable, then I am perfectly happy to strike this down, and I'll vote against it as well.
I just wanted a quick clarification from you if this is actually within WUSA's power.
It's definitely something we can dedicate resources to. Strike me particularly unusual as something we would do. Yeah. It just strikes me as like not the best use of resources if there are other better bodies to do that. Okay, seeing no other hands, we're going to take a vote on this. So all opposed to this motion, please raise your placards. Placards down. I feel like that's kind of self-evident. Okay. Ripperoni, moving on to the next one. Wait, where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Okay. Be it resolved that the General Assembly pass the Waterloo Undergraduate Association Work Registrar's Office to reduce the impact of morning classes by primarily attempting to avoid scheduling a cohorted with a large majority of classes in the first daily time slot. Doing this, not allowing a single class to be placed in the first daily time slot multiple times in a week in order to avoid the effects of half-aware minds and broken alarms. Be it further resolved that the Computer Science Department should be engaged to support Registrar's Office in order to update the system to accommodate this change, with the obvious caveat being that this be one of the least important variables in play for the operation of the computer system. So I got a little bit confused at the end there. Okay, do I have a seconder for this motion? Seconds this motion. Quinn, would you like to speak to it?
Long shot of the things that I think I proposed. Mostly this was to address, especially in cohorted programs like mine, I'm not aware personally of how many programs act like ours, but all of our courses are selected. And often they make very odd decisions on what classes should be placed at what times. For example, in ours, they placed math courses 5 days a week at 8:30 in the morning, and we all did awful at them because none of us learned in half of our lecture time for that week. And so I think either trying to shy away from morning classes or at least rotate which classes are first in the morning to accommodate both people who enjoy morning classes and those who don't, and try and rotate things around for when different people are learning the best.
Denver, would you like to? Okay. I'm going to Marie and then going to Naman. I'm going to state on record that I'm very strongly opposed to this motion because A, time management is part of the learning curve that you have at university. You have to figure out how to manage your schedule. B, elementary school children go to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, so we should probably be able to do it. And while I realize that they probably have more arranged sleeping schedules than we do, that is just part of life. And having those morning classes earlier in your years allows you to have more flexibility with later classes in the day. In most programs, I won't speak for engineering because their schedule stays crazy most of the time, but in almost every other faculty, it allows you to have later classes in the day because profs teach those classes first thing in the morning, and then you can have later classes for the rest of your degree. Naman?
Hello. In addition to what Marie said, there are also some logistical challenges to this. Like when you can have a lecture not only depends on when you can attend it, but also when the professor can attend it. So if the professor is only available in the morning because they have like research commitments or something in the afternoon, like this would simply not be possible, right? And also, I don't think any of us know how changeable the registrar's office system is. I know for context that Waterloo Works was like built by some third-party company, and I believe it's like not trivial to make changes there. So I imagine such a system could also be in place for scheduling courses, and in that case, just making any changes would be an uphill battle at all, right? So I don't know if this is technically possible and if this is possible with professors at all. Yeah, so on top of not being a good idea, maybe it's not even possible.
As I said, this one was a bit out there even for me, and I'm perfectly happy to drop it. It already seemed likely unfeasible, and with the concerns brought up, I think it is probably entirely unfeasible. So I'm perfectly happy to just move to a vote and likely strike it down.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this motion? Seeing none. So would everyone opposed to this motion please raise your placards? That's not a placard, Catherine. I'm watching Catherine make the walk of shame to go pick up a placard. There we go. Thank you. Okay. If I were to count that all out, the results would be that this motion fails. So congratulations, Quinn, for sending 4 motions. Okay. Moving on to the final motion we have on our floor today, folks. Scrolling. Oh, wait, no scrolling. Okay. The motion is the board approves the motion to invest capital and space into a music sound studio in the SLC, the details of which will be presented by Jam Network to WUSA as soon as the letter is to begin the process of making it a reality. Second is Catherine. Okay. So we spoke ahead of time to the folks at the Jam Network, and they've prepared a PowerPoint presentation. They're still only going to have 10 minutes to go through this.
Yes, I have to call up my other members who know who they are. We're going to call.
When you actually start talking.
Okay. We're good. Hello, everyone. We're extremely excited here right now. I'm Charlie. This is Chris, Hussein, Richard, and Aman. We are here for a purpose. We are here to talk to you about, we'll go back to the first one. We're here to talk to you about our motion to build a sound studio in the SLC. You can go on now. So we have a vision. The vision is very ambitious. Essentially, we dream that one day there is a room in which students can go to essentially very professionally or just casually record audio in forms of music, in the forms of maybe podcasts, maybe like a personal project or an academic project. We have this vision that all undergrad or students in general can access this space on campus. And just go back, yeah. And so we want to present that to you right now.
So there actually was a sound, or it was more of like a audio for that students to go in and do like things, narrations, like time. It's shut down now, but it changed in people. So we see there's demand for it, and Charlie will talk about that, the issues that had, and we're tackling those issues. With the imagining will be a WUSA turnkey desk similar to how the piano is currently. We imagine it being open to all students, and we've dealt with some of the logistics based off of local public studios and questions at private studios. We envision that will be primarily left up to WUSA as to however they envision this being run, but we're just proving that we have put in the background work and we understand that there are a lot of logistical issues to deal with in the operations of a studio such as this.
I have thoughts about the logistics, but of course, as we progress through this project, we are certainly willing to work with WUSA and other people to sort of finalize sort of details. Moving on.
So benefits for the students. Part of this, we put out a petition 2 weeks ago, and in that time, we received 211 signatures in with more still to come. And so, as a part of it, we asked, would you use it for? So there was a resounding amount. It would give them the ability to record and produce music, practice musical level that's possible now. And it's available to all students on campus, which, since there's no alternative that currently exists, people who have sort of the skills and motivation, not the resources and funds, would be able to do that. The petition was individuals, but also clubs, and the list at the bottom that support us and that petition. And yeah.
And organizations as well. So this would transcend music even. For example, Imprint may use this to work on sort of journalistic videos and other such things, and many, many other clubs and people would do this. So this is not just beneficial for students. It's beneficial to the student union and the university. If we're being honest with ourselves, obviously UW, not necessarily known for the arts. And we really, really, really believe that this space is a great way to enhance the real and the sort of the reputation of Waterloo as an arts community, as an arts university. Not only that, it would also, if it becomes a WUSA service, it would also add to the sort of portfolio of WUSA. We can see that there's one spot missing in this board down. It would finish that off. And it would, so this space, open to all undergraduates, would be only one of a few of its kind. There's a lot of other music spaces at, let's say, U of T or even at Conrad Grable right now at UW, but all around the country, but they're only available to certain students, let's say music students of a specific class. And so we envision this being open to all students and bookable for all students. So how many of you guys know campus? Oh, okay, we do. Okay, this is outside of E2. This is the building on a sound studio. Next slide. And this is what the outside sound studio looks. I was actually in network, and we were using this very small, but it did the job. During the pandemic, it shut down. But it actually shut down mainly because a lot of people in the organization were tired and so lost either interest with it or weren't able to do it more. While it was running, it was extremely popular, and it was popular for music reasons, but there were also like other things they did in there.
I'd just like to add that it was shut down because the primary purpose it was supposed to fill with narrations, and that wasn't met. So they didn't think they could fit off because it wasn't.
So yeah, space existed, and we essentially want to bring a better version of it because there were problems, like they said. Actually, personally, you backed our project, and, or backed it at least, and I can direct you to them. And so, yeah, so, and then I think moving on to the next one. As of right now, there is a lack of alternatives. There's if you want to travel there, and a GVJ student in good standing, you can use studio is also in Conrad Grable, only available to students taking the Music 275 class. There's the Waterloo Public Library off campus. And then if you have your equipment or your Halo studio, you can do that. But there's not really say accessible space for this moment. EV2 closest thing that we had for that.
This is just a general. We have a planned budget. Unveil the whole budget later. This is just to remove the black where the number came from. With the estimated equipment budget of slightly under $20,000, we can kind of go through these just to show a breakdown. Control room equipment comes out to about $4,200. This is computer software, monitors. Equipment, we have a selection of microphones, audio interface, headphones for performers and producers at the iBox. Set of instruments, that a lot of people will want to bring their own instruments, but we'll have a provided selection of instruments available for people to use. And the general utilities and accessories necessary. Charlie for.
So we see all instruments, and our first thought might be, oh, it's get loud. And so one thing, a major part of this project is going to be the design and construction of, say, good sound, to make sure the room is like professional for students to actually get good audio, but B, not disturbing to the rest of wherever they are. We'll have to. So we've done research in looking at how is this possible, how can we get this construction design. I want to further, before we enter our budget on this, this is essentially an example of what we found in terms of a contractor that's willing to do this. Set in terms of the contractor and the number, like in terms of the budget that we've come to in this contractor. So yeah, enhancement, soundproofing, design, creative design of it, and yeah, construction. So I went to Quaid to talk to the music town Waterloo, and I asked, recommend building a sound studio. They pointed me towards this company. Very well known, they're a Canadian company, and they recommended it to us. So I ended up calling the guy, and we had about a 2.5 hour chat. Everything basically I need to know, or we would need to know about how this works. They specialize in high-end around 2005, and we feel like good about them as a company. With that being said, we're by no means set in stone with this. Merely an example to show you what kind of goes into this. Anything else you want to say about this? Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, yeah, so this company has done many things in around the area. Various studios in Hamilton, constructed the library, studio, and they've been involved in massive projects. It's not in here, but more lower than that, still quality. Okay, so before this is a outline potential cost. And when we talk to this Audio Space, they're kind of a high-end company. They gave us sort of a range from involved at $304,000 for that estimate. With that being said, there are certainly other contractors we haven't got a quote from them, but there may be other options to go lower. In reality, to build something like this, it's going to be at least $100,000. So we'll say that up front.
Yeah, just to add on to that, essentially we could only get a quote from Audio Space because no one else was willing to provide a quote if we don't have a room or a place that they can inspect first. But Audio Space is definitely like mid to high range in cost, so this isn't like something like, yeah, that's the exact cost that it's going to be. We really want to emphasize that it's going to be a range that could go from probably around like 100 to 400K.
Yeah, and as you can see, the vast majority of the budget is on the construction design, on the equipment. So anyways, moving on with this. So we've dabbled in looking at the WUSA budget. We're by no means experts of it. Taking a tertiary glance, we noticed that, oh God, we noticed that there are some available outlets for potential funding in the future. We noticed that WUSA made $2 million in net income last year. Don't know where that's going exactly.
Sorry, folks, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Oh, just quickly at the end, let's just skip to the end. There is like a way we get to this one, like the first step is approval. After that, yeah, okay, sure. So what we need right now is just basically an estimate of room dimensions and possible rooms. Okay, questions? Okay, yeah. All right.
Sorry, Abaraj wants to give you his speaking time so you can continue to the end of.
Okay, perfect. We'll be short from here. Anyway, yeah, we've looked at the WUSA budget and we found some available. Can we go back actually if we have a little bit more time? So yeah, potential funding from the university. If WUSA could reach out to the university and ask them for potential funding. We also, I remember talking to Seneca, who was the finance minister in 2019-2020, and he told me that there was a plan to allocate $1 million a year for the next 10 years in student life. So I don't know where that's going, but potentially some of that could be going into here. GSA is collaborating as well, potentially. Private donors, these are just questions we're raising. So yeah, so these are some of the outlets that we can get the money from.
And we feel like we can justify the cost because it's a one-time investment for something that will be really long-term. And then maintenance fees are like pretty much non-existent. We've looked into those as well, but yeah.
The ongoing cost would be very minimal. But anyway, we can, so yeah, essentially we have, how do we get from nothing like we have right now to an actual working sound studio? Well, first of all, we would need general support at this meeting, as the amendment will suggest. And then the first thing after that is we will need some sort of room dimension estimate or even a potential room for this project. If there's no potential room for the project, we can't really go anywhere because whoever's going to build it one day needs to actually have a sort of thought about the room. And of course, with the budget, we're obviously going to be in consultation with WUSA and other parties on what that exact budget will look like. And then eventually the contractor builds it, blah, 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 blah. Finalizing logistics, like how long people will be able to rent it out for, all that stuff. Pick an opening date and bam, we have a studio. And last slide. Yeah, and so basically right now we would need some sort of space or spaces that are possible, and B, if there is sort of a maximum cost that the board is willing to allocate for this, we need to know that in advance. And then last slide here, one more, and are there any questions? I don't know how that's going to work, but yeah.
This is Catherine. When we go to the other folks, if they have questions, they may cede their time to you to provide answers to questions. I might also say something after Catherine speaks. Okay.
Esther, do you mind putting the agenda back on the screen with the amendment?
Do you folks mind like sitting for now? Yeah, sorry. I missed my I have a little
Thank
meeting.
you, Charlie. So right before the meeting, oh wait, a second. Yeah, I worked with the Jam Network representatives here to workshop.
Is Charlie seconding or? Sorry, someone needs to second the amendment. Okay, Matthew seconds the amendment. Okay. Oh, yes, Eula.
I worked with the Jam Network representative folks to workshop an amendment that basically gets at the same intent on outcome and impact of the motion, but hopefully gets us there in a way that allows for the most flexibility for us to get the best outcome possible, if that makes sense. I've gone ahead and rewritten to these be it resolved statements. So be it resolved, the General Assembly tasks WUSA with investigating the on-campus space to a permanent audio recording studio available for student use at no or nominal cost, which would be suitable for individual or group recording of music, podcasts, interviews, and other similar professional, recreational, or academic uses. Maybe I don't like that. Since I'm actually still actively motioning, can I change the professional, comma, recreational, comma, or academic to personal, professional, or academic to the whereas clause? Changing,
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Just changing these to match that. And then Otherwise, also just looking at the feasibility of different implementations, location, project funding, and the way that we want to ongoingly support the operation of the studio. So those operational aspects like how bookings will work and who is in charge of that and who's in charge of making sure the equipment is all taken care of. And all of those are small details that are best left with as much flexibility as possible at this high level. And the General Assembly is in a great spot to task with the highest, most important thing, which is what is the core of the outcome that we want. And the core of that outcome is to have a audio recording studio available on campus, which students can access for personal, professional, and academic usage. And then finally, preserving another aspect of the original item, be it further resolved, the General Assembly tasks WUSA with consulting with the Jam Network throughout the above process. Obviously, our friends here at Jam Network have done a lot of work. For people who haven't looked at the report, they submitted a 9-plan proposal with the bibliography. So we clearly have a lot of really passionate people who know what they're talking about, and it would be sure that we're continuing to for guidance on where we're going to supplement all of the other additional resources that we get from being able to draw on a professional research department.
Before we go to Matthew, I'm just going to use my ability as chair here to sort of interrupt and just make sure that, again, like sort of not really fact check, but provide some additional context so that you can contextualize the presentation that was given versus what WUSA can actually do and how much things generally cost. So there's generally a lot of procurement processes that you need to go through. In my background with like endowment funds and capital projects, things often end up more expensive than you would expect. So the number estimates probably are not the most accurate that they need to be. I will also say, though, that the work within a university, like, there's a lot of money in different places and it's not fully unreasonable to do something like this. But again, like the very specifics of this, including the placement or how it's administered or whatnot, like that is probably subject to change. But as you can see, the folks here brought an example of things that could work and explained the utility and what they were looking for the general vision. So I would say, you know, take that away from their presentation, but note that nitpicking on the specifics probably is not something that you want to do right now. So I'll let Charlie say something and then we'll go to Matthew.
I 100% agree in the fact that it is very hard to get specifics sort of at this time as well, when there are sort of so much unknowns of what the project will even look like in its finality. I suppose what we're trying to say, like you said, is we want to present the idea as something sort of that is positive and to be excited for, and then once we go forward, we can get more of those specifics as we go, so that one day we can have a final budget that we can actually approve as a group. So.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very nice presentation. Probably on the amendment versus the original motion, I like the amendment a lot more. It gets more at exactly what needs to happen, which is a little bit of investigation at WUSA professional staff role to get that plan and then get it happening. I'm planning to vote in favor of the amendment and the thing comes after it on the actual motion. I think it's broadly a good idea. I'd like to see it happen. It will cost, as Steph said, a little more than your estimate. One, we have to work through Plantops as an intermediary, so it always adds time to money. But to the point, we are in a building with asbestos. Asbestos is very, very expensive to get rid of. If you don't touch it, it's fine. But for context, the Math Socks coffee and donut shop recently moved a wall out to expand their room, and that cost $500,000. And to delay as they found more asbestos. So heads up, asbestos is a thing, and it costs a lot of money. But broadly, there are mechanisms for financing. This is a thing that I imagine would be a compelling thing to try to get support from across campus on, from different partners, from the university, from the endowment funds, from the WUSA budget as well. So I think it's a great thing to be investigating, and I hope we can proceed forward with it. I think it's a good addition to campus.
you for that, Matthew. And shortly, part of why we're doing this is to initially get WUSA's support so that we can together sort of go out and find those other groups that will want to do this. So, yeah. Yeah.
Go over here. Just a reminder again, we're talking about whether or not we want to replace the initial language with the amendment, and then we go through that, then we can talk a little bit specific whether or not this is something we actually want to do. Cool?
Okay, I don't know if this, my name is Matthew as well, so, but maybe conduct a survey, like garnering more like demand out there from students for such a big project as well, just to verify some of the, maybe another be more specific about what happens, like something breaks down when the student is using it and stuff like that. So, but that's probably way in the future. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself, though, but yeah.
Are you all right with ceding your time? Catherine can answer a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, definitely big fan of the outcome here, and the amendment is just what I think is probably the best way to get what most of us are hoping for. And all of those intricacies of council, I forget what the second half of the clause is supposed to be. A lot of that, or all of that rather, will fit into the investigation into feasibility of the project and what the scope of the project will look like. So everything should be covered in there. I did my job.
Go to Denver.
I'd like to speak for this. I think it's a really good balance between the initial target being proposed, but also leaves a little bit of flexibility, recognizing that this is a big ask and it's something that might not come to fruition potentially. So leaving that flexibility, creating a couple different groups, looks like the group involved has done a lot of their background work to support it to at least this idea. So very on board with this. And personally, as a musician, and I need to represent my proxy who's in favor, I'm very in favor.
Of conducting a in 2020 when we initially groups and individuals have cited and they would be and we're focused on
one act of stress also at the moment they've all conduct like addition with I think it's like more forward with investigating the feasibility and not delaying with into interest now because I think we've got a good sense of interest ready at the moment.
For context, something about surveys is that you ask multiple questions. So it's likely that, you know, it's likely that what type of usage students want to prioritize access to. So include questions about interest. And all of it kind of works together in a magical research way.
Oh, Catherine's been running around on the. Yeah, my apologies for that thing gotten not count of how many speaking turns folks have had as much as I should. Hope things are still in a fair and equitable way.
I would like the question.
Motion. The second, the question. Okay. Sorry, let me explain what's happening first. So there's a motion called it majority, it's debatable. So as soon as we start the vote, the idea is that every we pass or we don't, but that stops us talking. So things are very circular right now. And okay. So The folks back there in the corner being sort of loud, can you, a little bit? Cool. Okay. Okay, so all in favor of calling the question, raise your placards. One, two. Okay, put your hands down. Okay, all against calling the question, please raise your placards. Okay. Can you abstain calling the question? I don't think you can.
No.
No, okay. Then I will take the question as called. Okay, so then we are voting on this amendment. All opposed to the amendment, please raise your placards. Okay. All abstaining from the amendment, please raise your placards. Okay, so the amendment passes, and now we are discussing the motion as. Do we have anyone speaking to the motion as presented now? Okay, hello, friend. That was fast, Catherine.
Hello, thank you so much. I would just like to clarify when it says BIRT, the General Assembly tasked WUSA with investigating the feasibility. I would just like to add in, like, after feasibility, address interest of dedicating, just to make that clear in there. So,
Okay.
yeah, motion to amend,
Okay,
yeah.
so there's a motion to amend. Do we have a seconder for that? Okay, Denver seconds. Can you just read the sentence as you would like it to read?
So in the be it resolved, the General Assembly tasked WUSA with investigating the feasibility, and now I'm going to add in and address interest, and then continue on of dedicating. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Catherine.
Sorry, I'm just gonna grammar. I'm so.
If you use desirability, it works.
Tasks with investigating interest in, investigating the interest in, and then those are the only two words we have to insert.
We love grammar.
Thank you, that sounds good.
Okay, seconder, are you okay with that too? Okay, cool. You may speak to the motion if you would like to.
Oh, I would just like WUSA to conduct a survey or some kind of forum to connect with students who would be interested in the student body to like gather enough support that we're gonna spend money on this studio and we'll get our money out of service and make sure there's enough students who will actively use the service and that kind of thing.
Moving over. Oh, sorry. Yeah, seconder and then Quinn.
I have nothing to say.
See what I have to work with?
If we are going to do this, I'd like to just make sure it happens at the same time as trying to find a building and doing other things, because this is already going to take like at least 5 years to do. And if, I don't know how long, it's going to take, I feel like it's going to take forever. And if we add another 2 months onto that to do a survey and properly assess everything and do that before, that just adds more to the timeline.
Catherine, then Rory.
I think that I take this amendment as fairly friendly, which is to say that I have no issue with it passing. I think that it doesn't change the nature or spirit or final outcome of this item, and I expect with the expertise of our research staff that we're not going to have any issue where we have like too many distinct surveys going on. I think that interest in particular pairs very well with interest in stories of how students will access the space and all of that. So it can all go into one thing because having one question is not, yeah, cool.
Sorry, Rory had a hand up first, and then we go over it.
It's just point of information. Can we clarify?
proud of you for using a point of information.
So interest in would mean that WUSA would reach out to students to understand the interest of them participating in such a studio space. It would use such a studio space as mentioned in the motion about personal, professional, and academic use, just to make sure we're going to put our money into something that will be actively used and will support students in everyday life and academic and personal uses.
Yeah, sorry, we have to go here first, and then, okay.
So to kind of go along with this information, part of the petition, we didn't have time to share the whole thing, but it includes relevant information for this and a section where people and clubs as well, because it was clubs and individual signees, talked about what they would use the space for. And so we would for sure be able to pass on this petition information as part of interest-seeking measures.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment to add interest? Alex and Marie aggressively shaking their heads. Oh wait, we have Charlie. Too bad, folks.
I just suppose from this side of the floor, there's concern about the time and resources that would go into WUSA getting interest. When we have demonstrated somewhat that there already is interest, we are concerned of the time and resources that would go into this survey, but I'm not opposed to it, I'm just concerned about that, and the room is.
I don't expect that to how I've seen surveys play out and what the nature of that investigation, because it's not just surveys, it's potentially, focus groups, intercepts, environmental scans, lots of different avenues of research. And I don't think that adding one parameter of what we're looking into as basic interest should affect any timeline or research use at all.
Okay. Are there any remaining comments on the amendment? Looking rapidly, so I will wait 10 seconds. Any other comments? Oh no, I should, okay. So all opposed to the amendment, please raise your placards. Okay, I count 15, put your hands down. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your placards. Okay, passes by 4 votes. Chen, Mike, Alex.
Hi, I'd like to call the question, please.
Okay, seconder to call, okay. The question has been called. This is a non-debatable motion. So everyone in favor of calling the questions, please raise your placards. On calling the questions, so if you would like debate to unfortunately, you can't debate on bowl and you can't add additional things now. Sorry, folks, I think we've called the question. Okay. Okay. So, final motion right now. Corey, can you ready the thing that we're supposed to do at one point? Thank you. Okay. Okay, all opposed to this motion, please raise your placards. Okay. All abstaining from this motion, please raise your placards. Okay, I'm actually going to do the in favor one because it's kind of exciting. All in favor, please raise your placards. There we go, and the papers have it. We have passed this motion. Okay, scrolly, scrolly, folks. So do I have to motion? Okay, for seconds. All in favor of adjourning this meeting, please raise your hands. Okay. I would like to invite Abaraj up to the stage. Be great. Trust me, trust me, trust me. Keep the live stream going. Okay. Okay. Turnkey. Turnkey. I tried to set this up for you. Is it going? No? Is it going to play? Can you make them play it? Come on. I'm so disappointed right now. Wait, no, it's going to happen. Wait, stay in your seats. It's going to be great. Please.
Is this when I stall by lecturing on the governance processes that student-controlled university ancillary
We're gonna do it.
go through? On which sits voting members of students usually selected by WUSA. By the way, you can just start playing it at any time. I'm just going to talk. The committee is, the voting membership of the committee is largely undergraduate students, so they are fundamentally student-controlled. There are student services which are run by the university, so that includes athletics and recreation, student success office, the Writing Communication Center, campus, which encompasses counseling services, health services, and promotion department. I feel like I'm missing one, but that's okay.
You're on the phone with your girl up about something that you said, but you'll never know your story like I do.
The kind of music she doesn't like,
she'll never know your story like I do. Come on, Jam Network. She wears high heels, I wear sneakers. She and I you mean about the day where you wonder what you